I got the privilege of meeting Matthew. You'll find out later he's not from Texas. He says he's from Texas. We'll see how that goes when he gets up here. He's internationally recognized consultant, speaker, blogger, author, mentor, coach, and entrepreneur with 5 multi-million-dollar business success stories under his belt. He's an extremely young guy. I was very impressed to get to meet him earlier at the age of 30. He's the founder and CEO of the Rapid Growth LLC, dedicated to achieving maximum return on investment of businesses of all size. Through his client list and multiple Fortune 500 companies, his real passion is helping small business owners end the overwhelmed, eliminate the stress and guesswork to your business. With that, help me welcome Matthew. Thank you.
Mate, how you going? Thank you. What a wonderful welcome for somebody from all the way on the other side of the world, or actually as far as Austin now. But I'm really excited to be here, and more specifically in front of a group of builders, which you'll find out why more so in a minute. So what I want to do really is start by telling you a little bit about Wendy. Now, Wendy was a language coach out of California. She taught kids and adults Mandarin. And the real problem that she was having is that there were so many people moving into California that also wanted to teach kids and adults Mandarin. However, she was charging $50 to $80 an hour, and these people wanted to charge $30 to $40 an hour, like a lot of new businesses, to get their first clients, to get their first success stories. More than that, she had to also deal with the fact that we now live in this wonderful global economy, and because of that, she was dealing with people in China advertising $12 an hour education directly from cities in China. Worse than that, thanks to our friends in Silicon Valley, she also had to deal with the fact that there were these new technologies where I'll teach you Mandarin, you teach me English, and we just won't charge each other anything at all. So she was having to compete against free. And she came to me and she said, Matt, how do I compete in this crowded market where really all I've got to compete on is price? She came to me for sales advice. And I said, Wendy, what we really need to do is we need to look at how we can avoid the battle altogether. So what I did is I started to look at all of the clients Wendy worked with, and she worked with hundreds of clients over the years. But what I found is there were 2 people specifically, and it really was only 2. These were executives being relocated across to China. And she helped them with 3 other things. The first thing she helped them with was this concept called galaxy. Now for us, when I say galaxy, you think I mean outer space, right? It means the same to me in Australia, but in China, that's actually the Chinese word for rapport. So in China, it's very, very different the way a sales relationship works. I mean, in the Western world, we've all had this experience, right? We're trying to sell a house or to do a luxury build, and we might meet with somebody for 45 minutes to an hour, and at the end of that conversation, we're going to ask, well, if we're really bad at sales, we're going to ask, so would you like to move forward? And they're going to respond with yes, no, or everyone's favorite. Let me think about it, right? So a week from now, I might reach back out to them and I'll say, so what about now? Do you want to move forward? And if they still say they want to think about it, I know my chances of getting that sale are going down and down, right? Well, in China, it's very different. They're going to want to meet with you 5 or 6 times before they even discuss business. They're probably going to want to see you drunk over karaoke once or twice. It's just the kind of people they are, and here's why. They're not talking about transactional 12 or 24-month deals like we do in the Western world. They're talking about 50 to 100-year contracts. I mean, this is longer than a lot of people's careers and lifetimes. And because of that, they want to know the kind of person they're getting into bed with, who they're going to be working with for that long period of time. I mean, a contract is not worth the words it's written on when you're talking about a relationship for that long. So she helped them understand that. The second thing she helped them understand was the difference between e-commerce in China and e-commerce in the Western world. And the third thing, probably the most important, she helped them understand the importance of respect. Like learning the language isn't enough. You've got to reduce your accent. Otherwise, they'll see it as disrespectful. It's very similar to how somebody hands a business card out and the respect that's required in China versus here. We've all been to networking events, and what do we do in the Western world where somebody hands you a business card? We'll continue talking, right? We'll take it, we'll put it in our pocket, and then later we'll get home and we'll be like, who was this Matthew Pollard dude anyway? Maybe we'll pull out a pen and we'll write on the back of the card the guy I was speaking to that talks about marketing. If you do that in China, that's an atrocity. You know, I spoke just about a year ago at the Electrolux 100 Vice President Summit. Now, these are people that all command audiences of 100, if not 1,000 staff each. And every time they got a business card, when I handed it to them, they would hold it, they would cherish it, they'd look at all the details on the front before flipping it over, looking at all the details on the back, then pulling out a card case, slotting it in, bowing slightly, and then continuing the conversation. Anything less than that is considered disrespectful. I said, Wendy, what are you teaching these people? It's so much more than just language consultation. You know, what are you doing? And she goes, they're just a couple of things. I'm just trying to help them. Now, how many times when we're negotiating building contracts are we going to do so much more for them than what we've spoken about? But we don't mention that during the sales activity, right? I said, Wendy, you're stuck in your functional skill. Is it fair to assume as a result of the assistance you're giving these people, they're going to be more successful when they get to China? She responded, well, yeah, I mean, I hope so. I mean, that's the point. I said, great. So why don't we call you the China Success Coach? Forget about Mandarin. That's a long spiral to the bottom where the person that gets the deal loses because they've charged much less than what they should have. Instead, we created a 5-week intensive that worked with the executive, the spouse, and any children being relocated across to China. Now, why the spouse and their children? Well, firstly, we're in business. If we sell to more people, we can charge more money, right? But secondly, think about it. You're an executive being relocated across to China. How terrifying is that? And what do you think the chances of you being successful are if your kids aren't being successful, if your family members aren't being successful? It's important that the entire family unit is successful when they get there. So we crafted this 5-week program, and I said, what do you think of this idea? And she said, well, I love the idea, but who am I going to sell it to? I said, well, who do you think your ideal client is? She said, well, obviously the executive. And I said, well, yeah, I mean, the executive is a great candidate. I mean, when I moved from Australia to the United States, I was terrified, and people here still speak the same language. But that's not your ideal client. She said, well, obviously the corporation would pay. And I said, yeah, a lot of times the corporation has tens of thousands, if not hundreds or millions of dollars riding on a successful executive getting there and closing deals. But that's not your ideal client. Frustrated, she looks at me and she says, well, who then? I said, your ideal client is the immigration attorney. She looked at me puzzled. And I said, well, think about it. When I moved from Australia to the United States, the first thing I had to do was get a visa, right? Then I had to get a green card. Every time I had to go through an immigration attorney. I said, that's your ideal client. For those that don't understand that marketplace at all, the immigration market is really, really different. I mean, they go out and they hustle to find clients, and they'd be lucky to charge $5,000 to $7,000 for doing a visa or a green card. But that's not profit. They've got to go through all the bureaucracy, all the paperwork, and all the costs of finding a client just to get to work with somebody. They'd be lucky to make $3,000 on completion of these visas and green cards. I said, so just go and offer them the opportunity that if they give you a successful applicant, you'll give them $3,000. So she started approaching immigration attorneys, and she started introducing the idea, and they thought it was amazing. They were like, double my profit? What have I got to say? And she said, all you've got to say is, congratulations, you've now got your visa. Now, I just want to double check. Are you as ready as possible to be relocated across to China? And they'd say, yeah, no, I think we're good. We've got our visa now, thank you. We're learning the language. Kids are getting pretty good at it too. We've organized our place over there. I think we're set. And they'd simply respond, there's actually a lot more to it than that. I think you need to speak to the China Success Coach. Wendy would then get on the phone to the easiest sale in the world. I mean, these people were recommended by their immigration attorney. They were terrified to go, and their organizations were motivated to pay. And Wendy got to charge $30,000 for this. So to put that in perspective, instead of struggling every single day to charge $50 to $80 an hour, competing in a crowded marketplace, she got to make $27,000 after she paid the attorney for the easiest sale in the world. That's the power of a differentiated and unified message. See, so many people will look at the tactical things. If Wendy had to focus just on the tactics of learning how to sell more effectively, she would have already lost. Sure, I could have showed her some tactics to go out and be better at selling, but at the end of the day, she was still competing like for like against other people that were charging less than her. We've got to stop competing on features, on price, on discounts. I mean, how many times do we fill our customers' head full of jargon that they don't even understand? These days, people are looking for a message that they identify with, and for that, they'll pay a premium. So what you've got to ask yourself is, what's yours? What you need to be thinking about are what are the unique benefits that you provide outside the scope of your functional skill. Now, every time I meet with a builder, they say, well, no, what I do is pretty standard to what everybody else does. That's not true. I've worked with so many builders and there's always something unique about them. Everybody has unique experiences that perfectly qualify them to help different people with different things. They've got amazing skills. They're just so used to commoditizing themselves as like for like, and it ends up in this conversation about price and how much per square meter. And then you've got to ask yourself, what is the higher level benefit of that? See, for Wendy, it was Galaxy, e-commerce, and respect. The higher level benefit was China's success. For me, I'm a branding expert, I'm a sales strategist, I'm a social media expert, I'm a master in NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, I'm a business coach, I'm so many things. Nobody cares. They don't care how hard it was for me to learn these things, and they don't care how many years I spent learning them. But when I say I'm the rapid growth guy, I work with organizations, large and small, to obtain rapid growth. The simplicity of that message gets me heard in a crowded marketplace. So many times I hear people trying to articulate what they do. They go to a networking event and people ask what they do and they say, oh, I'm a custom builder. And then they say, oh no, I'm not looking for that, or I have a custom builder. And all of a sudden we're feeling like we're pushing things down people's throats, trying to convince them why we're different. I go to a networking event, people ask me what I do, I say, I'm the rapid growth guy. People, I've never heard that before. And now I have an invitation from them to explain what it is exactly that I do. Now, when I work with builders, so many times I've seen, again, that they're saying that there's nothing that separates them. Then we find out that they're amazing at woodwork and they put feature pieces in every one of the homes that they do. Or they specialize in working on specific lakes that no one else has the knowledge that they have. Everybody has unique skills. But generally, they focus on the things that everybody else does. Let's talk about niche marketing. Now, this is probably the most important thing you're going to learn. Speaking to everyone is speaking to no one. Plus, unless you've got the budget of Coca-Cola, it's ridiculously expensive. Many years ago, I made the decision that I was going to open up a college. And I started to research the market, and the first thing I realized is nobody trusts a new school. Nobody wants to study with a brand new school. The market was really two groups. The market of professionals that already had degrees. Those people didn't want to study with a new school. They wanted to get their qualification to go to their boss and say, give me a promotion, not have the boss look at it and go, did you just print this out last night? The other group of people that I had the opportunity to sell to was the market of high school graduates. Yes, that market's really competitive, but there was all these people that weren't getting the grades that they needed to, so they'd be willing to study at a school, even if it was brand new, to get the grades to get into the school that they wanted to go to. The problem with that is that there were so many people competing in that marketplace, and my life would have been an endless hamster wheel of getting clients and then losing them as soon as they got the best grades, which means I would never be able to say my students got phenomenal results. Looking at those two options, it just didn't make sense to open up a college. And then I discovered this market, the market of tradespeople. Builders, plumbers, electricians, tilers, landscapers. We decided this was an amazing market. This was the market that worked on a trade site. That's what we really fixated on. So we started to do our research on that group. Now, interestingly enough, while a lot of people come from different journeys, generally it happens at the age of 16, people make the decision to leave school because maybe school's not really working for them, or maybe they're making the decision to go out because they didn't buy into that whole, we need to have a degree to earn a phenomenal income. They see all these tradespeople out there making great money and they're like, we want to be that person. So they go out and they do an apprenticeship. Now, while I'd like to think things have changed a lot over the last few years, and especially now that our goal really is to try and drive as many young individuals into the trades as possible, we may have really shifted the way we educated. But back then, generally when you started an apprenticeship, the way you learned was through sarcasm and aggression. You do something wrong and people would pick on you or get really angry with you until you never did that again. Now, over many years of that, you start to realize, I'm not getting yelled at as much. And then you look around, you're like, well, hang on a second, I'm better than everybody here now, but I'm getting paid the same as what everybody else is getting paid. I know, I'm gonna go and start a business for myself. So they do, they go out into business for themselves and they get their first set of customers. Now all of a sudden they've got to manage budgets and financials, they've got to market themselves, they've got to handle stock orders, and because their business is growing, they've got to manage staff and they've got no idea how to do any of these things. Well, but staff they do, sarcasm and aggression. It's how they learn, right? So they start to run their business and they're really struggling. They know they need help, but they don't want to go back to an education facility. I mean, school had either let them down or they thought it was a waste of time. And they, even the people that left for the right reasons generally will tell themselves this saying, we've all heard it, right? If you can't do, you teach. They don't want to go back to school. They know they needed business coaching though. The problem is they're not making money. They can't afford that. So we launched into the market with business coaching at a price you can afford. And we grew to 3,500 business owner students from the trade demographic in 3 years. That's rapid growth. What can we learn from this? Everyone is not your customer. See, this is where people get it wrong. What they think about, especially people when they're just getting started, they say, well, I want a customer. Any customer will do. But that's not true, is it? Why would you want, when you're a brand new business, why would you want to compete against everyone else like for like when you've got less referrals, less proof of concept, less testimonials, less case studies, less economy of scale? As a new business, it makes no sense. And then over time, it still makes no sense. Specializing and realizing that everyone is not your customer is the key to rapid growth. Yet most people focus on selling to many. Now, sure, we didn't stay just within the trade demographic. We grew really, really quickly. And then the next thing we knew, we went, well, hang on a second, we're doing really well. We don't really need to spend much energy. These customers now come to us. But let's think about hairdressers and florists. They're kind of tradespeople too, right? So we grew into those demographics. Next thing we knew, we had the Law Institute of Victoria and the Australian College of Anaesthetists come to us. Doctors and lawyers are kind of tradespeople too. They've done a 5-year degree or a 7-year degree, but they've got no idea how to run their own business. 3,500 students in 3 years by realizing that everybody is not our customer. So what can we learn from this? What you've got to be looking for is what is the unmet need in your marketplace? And how you can use your unified message, your point of difference, your unique skills to speak directly to that group of people. Now, there was a presenter before me that spoke about the fact that you've really got to focus a business around what you're passionate about, what your purpose is. Because here's the thing. If you focus your business around what you're passionate about, what your purpose is, it generally is because you've got unique skills, unique talents, unique upbringing, unique customers that you've worked with that perfectly qualify you to work with that group. So while a lot of people sit there and say there's nothing that separates me, generally with just a few questions you find that there's a huge amount, as long as you're not trying to sell to everyone. I see people all the time and they're like, we're in the building trade, as many building contracts as we can get, that's the goal. But then they realize that 80% of their stress and 80% of their problems come from the demographics they shouldn't have been working with anyway. I see builders that specialize, and there's no discussion on price, if they just specialize doing what they do best, which is building around the lake, that no one else has that expertise. Other people that are really good at building, but once it gets to about the $2 million mark, or if it goes below the $750,000 mark, it just doesn't make sense for them. They don't have the experience. Other people that are really great at 2 million plus, but it just makes no sense below it, but they're still signing contracts they shouldn't be signing because they've got this belief that we need to be speaking to everybody. Instead, if they forget about that stress or price it so that if you do get a deal, it makes perfect sense. You'd love to do it. I've got an uncle of mine that cleans slate, and he used to always charge a specific price. And then when he retired, people still called him. So he tripled his price and said, you know what, if they say yes, then I'd be ecstatic. He's making more money now retired than he did when he was working full time because he wasn't worried about closing every single deal. So focus on pricing the people outside your niche so you'd still be ecstatic to get it. And then the people inside your niche, you become the only logical choice. So let's talk about sales systemization. Now, I'm going to put this quote up and give you a second to read it, because this is a really important thing for everyone here to know. For those people in the back that may not be able to read it, I'll read it to you. Everybody has a product to sell. Even if your company consists of just you and your computer, look around. If you don't see any salespeople, guess what? You're the salesperson, right? Now, a lot of people, when they see me on stage, they generally get this impression that I'm one of these naturally extroverted people, one of these people that has the gift of gab. You know, somebody can just get up and speak. You know, when I used to teach people how to sell, their response was, you know what, Matt, you're just one of those sales, people that could just sell to anyone, anything. It's really important for people to know where I came from. See, when I first started, I had a reading speed of a 6th grader. I had this thing called Irlen Syndrome, which basically meant that every time I looked at a word on a page, it looked different. So because of that, I really struggled to learn to read. As a matter of fact, I only found out the solution. My mother went researching like crazy when I was about 15, and by the time I was 16, she found these glasses. Basically, I put them on, and bang, I can learn to read. But it didn't mean I could magically read. It meant I could start the journey of learning to read. So for 2 years, I really, really hustled. And because of that, I really pushed through school, and I got into the top 20% of my state. But I was exhausted, and because I dedicated myself so much, I had no idea what I wanted to do. But that, and you guys are only going to get to see this slide for about a second. And this face, I'm going to change that slide back. I had really bad acne as well. So I was dealing with the fact that I really struggled to read, and I was really self-conscious about myself. I had no idea what I wanted to do, and I was horribly introverted. So I convinced my family that there was no way I could go to university at that stage. I mean, no way I could go to university. And this is, I'm sure that you're starting to learn to educate kids on this now, that going to university when you don't know what you want to do makes no sense. Because you'll either spin out and not complete, or you'll end up with a degree. I mean, I was going to study arts politics. God, I don't know what I would have done with that. So I took a year off to find myself for a year, and I convinced my parents, I didn't grow up in a rich family, so I convinced them that what I would do I would pay for myself. So I took a job at a real estate agency. Now I know what you're thinking, I'm the guy up the front selling. No, I'm the guy in the back office doing data entry with a look on my face saying, don't speak to me, I'm here to find myself for the year. Now, I'd worked there for about 3 weeks. And my boss comes up to me and he says, Matt, the company's not really doing too well, and they've just decided they're going to close down our office. Unfortunately, you're out of a job. I'd worked there 3 weeks. Now, Australia is very different to the United States. See, we have our summer break and our Christmas break at the exact same time. So everybody goes on holidays on the 20th of December, and they don't come back till the 15th or 20th of January. Now, most people here own a business, right? If you're going on a month-long holiday, how many people are you hiring a couple of weeks before that? Not many, right? I couldn't find a job anywhere. Except in the old-fashioned classified papers, there were advertisements for commission-only sales roles. Can you imagine anything worse for an introverted kid? That is not the job that I wanted to do. But I promised my family that I was going to support myself. And as a consequence, I took the job anyway. Door-to-door, commission-only telecommunications sales. Now, luckily enough, I was the only person that seemed to have gone to the interview wearing a suit. So they put me in the business team. Now, it wasn't the best suit. I mean, it shined in the sunlight. It was a lime green shirt and a post office red tie, but it's all I had. It was really hot in Australia at that time as well, so it was sweltering. And after 5 days worth of product training and not a single second of sales training, I got thrown on this road. This is called Sydney Road in Melbourne, Australia. Over 1,000 doors on each side. Which for me kind of made sense, right? I mean, if you're going to get told no a lot, why not go to a place where you don't have far to walk? So I walked into just before I walked into the first door, I remember grabbing the handle and going, oh God, no one's actually told me what to say. I don't know how to sell. So I took a deep breath and I walked in. And I was politely told to leave. In my next door, I was less politely told to leave. Then shortly after that, I was sworn at. And shortly after that, I got told, my personal favorite, go and get a real job. This was a real job. I mean, that's all I could do, right? Door after door, I walked in and I got rejected, and I got rejected, and I got rejected. Until the 93rd door where I made my first sale. I remember I was ecstatic. I made about $70. Well, I was ecstatic for about 45 seconds. Then I had this realization, I gotta do this again tomorrow, and the next day, and the next, every day for the rest of the year. I mean, that wasn't okay. I had to find a solution because I'd convinced my father that I was gonna support myself. I mean, my dad worked 80 hours a week in his full-time job. I really didn't get to see him that much because he was so focused on supporting us. There's no way after a day I'm gonna go, sorry Dad, too hard, can't do it. But I needed to find a way, and I mean, I could have picked up a Brian Tracy or a Zig Ziglar book, but I had a reading speed of a 6th grader. I mean, it would have taken me a year to read the book, let alone apply the concepts. But what I did do is I convinced myself that sales had to be a system that was learnable, that I didn't need to have this so-called gift of gab. Because if that was the truth, well, my year was gonna suck. So what I did is I started looking for a solution. Where could I find the system? Now, back then, we didn't have things like Audible, which I absolutely love for consuming information now. But what I did discover was this new thing that was just really becoming popular at that stage. This thing called YouTube. Now, it surprised me back then, and might still surprise a lot of people. There's a lot more on YouTube than just cat videos. So I started to learn the process of selling. I looked at every step in the sales process, and every single day I went out into the field for 8 hours and went out and trialed out what I was learning. And every single day I would then go home for 8 hours and learn the next step or perfect the next step. 8 hours in the field, 8 hours at home. Sound fun to anyone? I hated it. All of my other friends that were going to university were out drinking and having a blast, and I was studying. Every single day though, I got better. The number of doors it took to get a sale kept going down. Soon it was 75 doors, and then 48 doors, and then 31 doors, then 18 doors, then 9 doors, then 3 doors. 6 weeks later, my manager pulls me in. I thought I'd done something wrong. And he looks at me and he's kind of got this baffled look on his face. He said, Matt, we're kind of blown away by this. But we just printed out the national sales report, and you're actually the #1 salesperson in the company, which just so happened to be the largest sales and marketing company in the Southern Hemisphere. It took me 6 weeks of hustle, but it was totally worth it. Now, after getting promoted about 7 times, now, it didn't start off so well. I mean, I got promoted the first time into a team management role. Everyone thinks because you can sell, you can manage. Well, I got given a team of 20. In my first week, all of them quit. So I went back to YouTube and I learned the process of managing. And then, shortly after that, I got promoted, and I got promoted and promoted. Within a year, 7 times I got promoted, and I got overconfident. So I made the decision, I'm gonna open up my own business. I'm gonna open up a telecommunications store. I mean, it was all I knew. And I looked at the marketplace and I saw the market was full of ridiculous competition. But it's very similar to the competition here, right? What are they all fighting on? Price. And because they're competing on price, they're trying to find ways of saving money. So they're moving their call centers offshore. The support that they had, they're old people that used to come into your business and show you how to use your phones or come and help you if something was going wrong, no longer existed. Now, I'm sure you guys all understand, saving money is important in a business. I mean, if your markup's 20%, $1 saves like $5 made. But what does it mean if your phone doesn't work and you've got a client trying to call you? How much money are you going to lose then? Businesses wanted to still have the service they had before, they just wanted to save money. So what we did was we launched with service you can count on. It didn't matter what carrier you went with, very similar to cricket, but for business-to-business mobiles, or cell phones as you guys call them. It didn't matter what company you went with, as long as you worked with us, we would handle your service in-house. And we grew to the #1 business-to-business brokership of cell phones in the country in 3 years. Year 3 alone, we turned over $4.2 million. Again, that's rapid growth. In 2007, I won what was called the Young Achiever Award. But more importantly than that, way more important, I went from scared to sell to teaching hundreds how to do it. Now, thanks to my best-selling book, The Introvert's Edge, I get the opportunity to teach thousands. Now, generally when I say this, I generally get asked the question, all right, Matt, I get it. You learned to sell, But on YouTube, really? Come on. Has anyone here heard of Nate Boyer? No? Maybe in Austin you would have heard of him. Any Austin people here? Okay. Maybe I'm not allowed to tell this story in Dallas because you guys are pretty competitive, but Nate Boyer was a former Green Beret. When he left the military, he made the decision that he was going to go back to school and he wanted to try something he'd never tried before. He decided he was going to play football. Now, while a lot of people used to play football in the backyard, he decided that other things were more important, so he never really did that. So for him, when he decided he wanted to play football at university, he really had to put in a lot of effort to learn the skills. Well, he did what's called walking onto the field. Now, as you can tell, I'm not really from around here. So I didn't know how incredibly difficult this was, but apparently it's almost impossible to do that. Well, within a very short time, when he walked on the field, he made the team at the UT Longhorns. Then he tried out for the Seattle Seahawks, and he made the team there too. At age 34, he was the oldest rookie in history, and 8 years older than the average player. Now, when he was asked, how is it that you learned to snap the football? That was his innate skill. He snapped the football. Here's what he said. I would literally watch YouTube videos and Google on how to snap a football and all that. That was my game tape. I'd go out and then emulate it. He learned to snap a football watching YouTube videos. Every single skill that we imagine is something that you have to have a natural ability for is 100% learnable, 100% masterable. And as a business owner, we need to be focusing on those skills. We all know that we're great builders, but that's not what allows us to be competitive in the marketplace. I'm going to finish with one story, which is a story of a client of mine, Derek Lewis. Now, Derek was a ghostwriter. And when he first reached out to me, he said, Matt, no one can afford me. I said, well, how much do you charge? He said, I charge $20,000. Now, for anyone that doesn't know what it costs to get a book written, right, $20,000 is like half the industry average. Like the minimum you should be charging is $40,000. Because it's a lot of work, it takes a lot of time, and to do a book to the quality that he does, it takes a lot more effort. So you can't write 20,000 books in a year, you can only take on a small number of clients. And it's not like you can take on 7 of the writers because you've then got to train them. It's tough. I said, Derek, what do you mean they can't afford you? You should be charging twice that. He said, well, they can't afford 20,000. They're definitely not going to be able to afford 40. I said, well, how did you decide? And this is an important question. How did you decide that they couldn't afford you? He said, well, people would inquire with me. I mean, he was lucky enough that he was good at Google AdWords and people would actually inquire with him. He said people would inquire with me and ask me questions. So I would respond. And then I would ask them questions and emails would go up and back until they asked the question. Anyone want to take a shot at what the question was? How much does it cost, right? And then they would ask that question and then crickets. Didn't hear from them again. So that's how I worked out that they couldn't afford me. I said, oh, that sounds terrible. What did you do? He said, well, I got fed up of everybody wasting my time. So I put my price on my website. I said, how did that go? He said, now no one contacts me. I said, all right, let me ask you a question, Derek. You're a ghostwriter, yeah? He's like, yeah. I said, what do you think your clients don't like doing? I said, well, probably writing. I said, how are you communicating with your customers again? These ridiculously long emails. They would ask questions, he would then respond with these sometimes page and a half responses, asking questions that would require a page and a half response. And this would happen for weeks until they asked the price. Now, I don't care. I mean, as a person that really struggles with reading and writing, I wouldn't care what he was charging. At the end of that, there's nothing that would make me want to work with that person. I said to Derek, I know that there's a lot of skills that you have that separate you from the person charging $1,500 on Craigslist, but you're not really giving me the opportunity to understand that, and writing is kind of a really personal thing. I don't want to hire someone that I haven't spoken to before. I said, here's what I want you to do. First thing, I want you to take your price off your website because that's not helping you we need to get those inquiries back. The second thing I want you to do is I want you to agree with me that you now charge $40,000. I mean, they're not paying 20, so why not charge 40, right? And then I want you to do this. Instead of doing what you're currently doing in the email dialogue, I want you to respond with just one email. Let's call the customer John. John, thank you so much for reaching out to me about your ghostwriting project. I just checked out your website and I'm ecstatic at the prospect of working with you. I actually just finished working with someone very similar to yourself, and we had an amazing working relationship. However, a successful book really comes down to the relationship between the ghost and the author. And because of that, I'd really like to get on a phone call with you to ensure that you and I are a fit. On top of that, I need to ask you a couple of additional questions before I can give you a firm quote. Below is a link to book into my schedule. Simply click below and I look forward to speaking with you shortly. Well, Derek started to do that. And as soon as he did that and some sales training, he got his first phone call 2 weeks later. And in 40 minutes, he made $40,000. Within 6 weeks, he made $80,000. Now, to put this in perspective, he'd made $27,000 for the year in 2013. In October of 2014, he'd reached out to me. He'd made $12,000 for the entire year. $40,000 in 2 weeks, $80,000 in 6 weeks. By the end of the year, $120,000. By the end of the following year, he made just shy of $300,000. Now, a lot of people assume that when I say this, they'll assume that that's the reason why Derek is on the cover of my book. Well, it's the reason why Derek got the ghostwriting project, because I'm like, well, you're a great case study, I'm going to get you to write my book. But it's not the reason why he's on my cover. The reason why he's on my cover is about halfway through the process of writing this book, Derek reached out to me and he said, Matt, the market has changed. And I said, what do you mean the market's changed? He said, well, the market's changed. Now I'm doing everything exactly the way you said, but now they're going away, they're thinking about it, and then they're ghosting me. Now, I didn't know what ghosting meant back then, but it seems that this is a really common word. They were just disappearing and never getting back to him. So I said, well, are you doing everything exactly the way that we structured? He said, yeah, everything exactly. I said, really, Derek, exactly the same way? He goes, well, I might have changed a few things. He changed everything. See, here's the thing about a sales process. Sales is a system, like anything else. It's a series of steps. And once you've got a structured process, especially once you've got a structured process that's working for you, you have to treat it like a science experiment. You can change one thing at a time. See if it makes a better result or hurts your results. But if you change multiple things, you don't know what's working and what's not working. And because of that, you can't possibly work out why your sales process or why the clients are disappearing. So what I said to Derek is, I said, what I want you to do is I want you to go back to the exact same process that you had when you first started. So he did. He went back to the exact same process. And within the space of 2 months, he locked in a client that took him to Switzerland, a $50,000 ghostwriting deal. The second deal was another $50,000 deal, $100,000 in less than 2 months, that took him to London for another author retreat. It's the first time that he's managed to take his wife to Europe. Be careful of the stories we tell ourselves, right? And when we're in the sales process or when we have salespeople, it's so common that we believe their excuses as fact or believe our own excuses as fact. And we have to ask ourselves the question, when did we decide that? So what can we learn from this? The difference between sales success and sales failure can be one simple thing you're not seeing, which is why it's so vitally important to learn the process. You know, an interesting story actually coming out of Texas was I worked with a building company that they'd grown, and they'd grown quite successfully to about a $6 or $8 million turnover. But because of that, they'd grown to a point where the husband could no longer do the sales calls anymore, and they hired somebody to be able to do that. So then they started to notice the growth kind of had stagnated. Now, the wife of the business had done, she was amazing at doing online marketing and driving people to the website, but when the phone rung, the person that they hired just really said anything that came out of their mouth. And that wasn't leading to success. So we looked at the process they were using and they weren't using one. And more importantly, we said that he needed to follow a process and he needed to create well-articulated stories that highlighted the benefits of the organization while helping people understand that they were the only logical choice. And he just wouldn't do it. So we had the option between hiring somebody new or one of the company owners, the wife, taking on the process of selling. Now, that's not something that she'd done in the past or something she really felt comfortable with. But once she felt and understood that sales was a process like any other, and felt like she had some strong stories that she could really grab hold of, where she could concisely and in a laser-sharp way articulate the value of what they offered, all of a sudden, their sales just exploded. Less than 2 years later, they're a $16 million building company. Just by learning how to articulate the value that they provide, one step in a sales process can make such a difference. Rapid growth really comes down to 3 steps: a differentiated and unified message, a niche of willing to buy clients, and a sales system that's structured to work. These are all incredibly vital, but what do we generally focus on? We focus on our functional skill, getting better at that. And these steps are generally all absolutely forgotten. I put this quote up at the end of every one of my presentations for 2 reasons. One is everyone kind of knows who this dude is, right? But secondly, I think this quote really encapsulates the importance of improving our business. Abraham Lincoln used to say, "Give me 6 hours to chop down a tree. He'll spend the first 4 hours sharpening the axe." Think about what you're doing in your business. What most people do in their business is akin to just keeping on chopping. It's absolutely time to sharpen the axe. So how do we do that? Well, firstly, this is not something you need to work with me to do. There's a 5-step template that I give out, and in the back of the room, there's a little bucket. If, Tim, you want to just wave your hand at the back? There's a little bucket. If you drop your card in there, what we'll do is we'll email you this 5-step template. Basically, this template, now buddy up with somebody and do this as a team with somebody else. But what you need to do is go through this 5-step process, and it'll help you work through the process of crafting your own unified message that excites and inspires prospects to want to know more. So when you go to networking events or if you speak to clients, they don't see you as a commodity like everyone else. And then discover your niche of clients so you're not speaking to everyone, which is speaking to no one. Now, I did this and I gave away this template at the National Freelance Conference we did it as a workshop, and there was about 200 people in the room. And at the end of that, I said, now put your hands up if you now have a strong unified message that you feel will excite prospects more than what you've been saying, the commoditized way of explaining yourself you have in the past. About 97% of the room put their hands up. I said, keep your hands up if you feel like you now have a good understanding of your niche that you'll be able to make great money out of. 97% of the room kept their hands up. Now here's the sad part. I said, now keep your hands up if this is more time than you spent on marketing since you started your business. 85% of the room kept their hands up. So what you'll need to do for this template to work, surprise, surprise, if you want it to work, you'll have to do the work. But it doesn't take anywhere near as long as you think. You think about it, I spent 6 weeks learning the sales process. It was a tough 6 weeks, but after that, my life was pretty much a lot easier, right? I got to benefit from that for life. What I would suggest is you find a partner in the room, buddy up with them, or find a friend in a different business and buddy up with them, and block out 2 hours to do this. That's all it will take for you to be 100 miles ahead of where you are now. Now, the other thing that you can also do, and my publisher hates me when I say this, you don't have to buy my book. What you do have to do, or I would suggest you do, is go to theintrovertsedge.com. There you'll be able to download the first chapter of my book. Now, one of the big things that I'm really focused on is, I founded National Introverts Week for this reason, and I founded Small Business Festival, which puts on an event across the nation. It's the #3 festival in America for helping small business, and 5,000 people got free education last year because I'm really passionate about helping introverts and helping small business. So one of the things that I did with my book that I was really focused on is the first chapter has the 7-step process that you need to follow with every customer conversation. If you do nothing more than just write down the chapter headings of that 7-step process that's clearly outlined in the first chapter of the book, write down what you currently say with customers, and put it under those chapter headings. Now, here's the key. If it doesn't fit, if some of the things that you say don't fit under those chapter headings, don't put it in there. Don't try and find a way to fit it in there. You shouldn't be saying that to your customers. And then what you'll realize is there's a bunch of gaps, generally around telling great stories and asking great questions that are missing. So fill those gaps. If you do nothing more than download that first chapter and do that, you'll double your sales in the next 60 days. Now, we actually fortunate to have some time left to do some question and answer. Now, we're going to have about 10 minutes to do that, and then after that, the trade floor is going to open up, so I'll let you know when that sort of time is going to happen. I'm actually going to stay around and answer a few more questions for people, but what you'll be able to do is at the back, if you do want a copy of the book, feel free to pick one up there. If you just want the template, just throw your card in the bucket and we'll just email you that template so you've got it. But there are some microphones over on the right that are going to be coming around, so if you've got a question, feel free to put your hand up, and we'll utilize this time. Gonna make my job that easy? So one of the things that I often get asked, and as I said, if you do have a question, where are the mic runners, by the way? Can you put your hands up? There's one over here, and where's the other one? Over there? Perfect. So if you have a question, just ask one of those people to come over to you and be happy to answer those questions for you. But the first question, there's a question over here. One of the questions I get asked all the time is, what makes the difference between an introvert and an extrovert, right? There's so many studies out there that say, oh, I'm an introvert, I'm an extrovert. Well, the truth is, the strategies in the book, really help you with either. But a lot of people really try to understand, as an introvert, can I sell? But first, am I an introvert or am I an extrovert? Well, the answer is, it's really about where you draw your energy from. One of the things that I find, I'll give you an example. So Small Business Festival Year 1, we had about 1,200 attendees, and the event ran for about a week. At the end of that week, Jim Cathcart, who is, by all things, he's the #1 most award-winning speaker in the world. At the end of that week, he and I had been involved in the event the whole week. At the end of that, I wanted to go into a dark room, put on a hoodie and watch a TV show and be just by myself. He was in Austin. He wanted to go out and experience the live music capital of the world, meet new people. He was energized by it. That's really the only difference. An introvert can network, they can sell, they can present like I'm doing right now, and a lot of times they can actually beat the extroverts hands down if they've got a system, because an extrovert's ability is based on their mood. So if they're having a great day, they're going to make great sales. Have a fight with their husband, their wife, their brother, their sister, all of a sudden their sales slump, sometimes for weeks or months at a time. An introvert will suck at sales up front. Like, we stink at it, really. But if we know that there's a process and we follow that process, every day we get better and better and better at it. And then, because it's regimented, we just continue that success. I remember when I spoke at Electrolux, that was in Thailand, and my grandfather used to sell Electrolux vacuum cleaners door to door. So for me, I was like, when I got asked, even though there was short notice, I'm like, you know what, I will do that. And then at the end of that period, I flew back, and I flew back on the Thursday night, forgetting that I was in my 30s, not my 20s anymore, and I was jet lagged like crazy. So I literally laid in bed and did 8 back-to-back sales calls with my eyes closed, and my closure rate barely changed. Because I had a system and a process, and I can do it in my sleep, and that day, I actually got the opportunity to do that. So
Matthew asked a question you mentioned earlier about affordable business coaching. Do you still do that? And talk to us about it.
Do I do what, sorry?
Affordable business coaching.
A full business coaching?
Affordable.
Affordable business coaching. Yes, so actually when I moved to the United States, the company that we moved that across to, they still do it, I don't. What I tended to focus on, and one of the things that I really focused on, what I really learned that I loved, and this is an important thing for everybody, is you've got to work out what it is you're on this earth to do. And a lot of times people focus on trying to get a building deal, but the building deal that they are trying to get is based on just getting the contract. For me, what I did is, and this is a really important thing when it comes to branding, and actually when you get to the 5-step process, the step 3, a lot of people struggle with that if they don't have a clear vision on their passions and their purpose. So there's actually a podcast, if people are struggling with that, it's called Better Business Coach Podcast is a podcast that I created, and episode 17 is called Forget About Goals, Why is the Key to Success? And one of the things that I really started to learn was, I learned I can create rapid growth out of anything, but I got bored really, really quickly when I was doing that. So what I realized is where my unique skills are, what I love to do, is really the initial stage, getting the unified message, helping discover the niche of willing to buy clients, and then creating the sales system that works. Next year, we're actually launching a platform in America called Better Business Coach, which will actually bring affordable business coaching to the United States. But thank you for the question. Yep.
Matt?
We've got a... Sorry, I'm trying to find...
Over here.
Perfect.
Hi, I'm a small business owner, and I'm kind of running everything and got lots of plates in the air. I'm actually an extroverted salesperson by skill and trade. I think I've just identified that I have a sales team of introverts, and this is a timely session for me. My frustration being more extroverted and trying to drive sales, I can't do it every day, and so I'm trying to run the business. I think my question is how to coach these introverts going through your workout sheet is step one. How would I coach them being more of an extrovert to introverts? Does that make sense?
Absolutely, yeah, definitely. So, and great question. So, one of the things that a lot of introverts really struggle with is having an extroverted manager, right? Because you'll say, or even extroverted sales trainers will say, it's easy, you just do this. It's not easy. Firstly, we're terrified to actually have the conversation. So introverts need something to grab hold of. If we know we've got a system and that we can get better over time, we'll feel fine. I worked with a commercial real estate company. Have you guys heard of Colliers International? I can never pronounce it with my Australian accent, but it's a big commercial franchise, real estate franchise. And when they first started, they really had two groups of individuals. They had a group of extroverted salespeople that sometimes they were actually the worst because they were, one of them prided himself on getting hyped up on coffee, fists on the table, yelling at the phone. They were bulldogs. And the problem is that the C-level executives would just hang up the phone. The people that would listen would be middle managers, and they really submitted to an appointment because they couldn't get the person off the phone. And that meant that the principals of the company were going to see all these people that really didn't want appointments in the first place. The introverts, though, were terrified to book appointments in the first place, best characterized by this guy, Thomas, who realistically, in his own words, in 6 months he made one appointment which was borderline useless. So if you think about these two groups of people, neither of them are great. What we did is we brought them back to a sales process. We gave them a very structured introduction that led to either a successful appointment or an objection. And then we taught them, and this concept's really important for your introverted people, so feel free to write this down. If not, it's being recorded. You can get access to it later. But what I taught them to say is, I perfectly understand the last thing I want to do is waste any of your time, however. Now, these are important words. I perfectly understand. I've listened to you. The last thing I want to do is waste any of your time. I validate that you're busy. However, now, for the people that are married, if you think the word, a lot of people will say the word but, and it drives me insane, because but is what's called a subtraction term. So if you don't believe me, go home and tell your husband, husbands in the room, tell your wives, dear, you look great in that dress, but, and see what happens. Okay, the goal for me is the word however is an additional term, right? However means everything that I said before that I still mean, where but is like, I didn't mean any of that, I'm just trying to make you feel better before I tell you what I really think. The word however is an additional term, and that what it does is for the extroverts, it gives them the opportunity to emotionally regulate, so they don't jump down the phone and strangle the client. For the introverts, it gives them a chance to take a breather and go, so what story do I need to tell them? Right? So it needs to be like a reflex, when the doctor hits your knee. So that's a really important statement. I perfectly understand the last thing I want to do is waste any of your time, however. And then what we did is we taught them some really structured key stories. Now, generally what you'll find is you don't need 100 stories. You only need about 2 or 3. And what you'll find is you'll get really good at telling one that'll give you the most success. But what you've got to do as an extrovert, you're really good at just telling the story off the cuff. An introvert will suck at that. So what you've got to do is you've got to get it down on paper, and you've got to focus on creating a well-articulate story. Now, this is not part of our standard process, but if you do want that, when you drop your card in that box, write, call it the story, we call it the story guide. Just write, I want the story guide on the card, and I'll actually give you a 5-step process that we just created for Oracle that walks you through the steps of creating a well-articulated story. And what you'll realize is it's actually a lot of the emotional drivers that really allow you to achieve that. But what we did is we taught them 3 core stories of people that, instead of saying, a person wanted this, like when you're trying to sell to someone in a networking event, it's, oh, I worked with a client very similar to you who wanted the same thing you did. Here's what we discovered. Here's what we did together. And here's the successful outcome. Now they're super excited. When it's an objection, it's, oh, we had a person that had a similar objection as you. Here's the outcome that here's what we did and here's the outcome that we got. So now they're so happy that they worked with us. Either way, you get a great outcome. Now, when we did this in commercial real estate, what was interesting is the extroverts actually got more success than the introverts at the start. But here's what happens. The extroverts tend to gravitate to wanting to use their natural personality, so they start to move away from the structure. An introvert holds onto it for dear life. And because of that, the introverts, actually 6 months later, the introverted guy that had only made one appointment that was useless in 6 months, he was the first junior partner to win the top dog sales award in the company ever. And it took him 6 months to get there, but he just became a master of it, because what will happen is an introvert will realize that the system is what's giving them the success, and if they keep perfecting that, they're going to get better and better. And they're really there are key things that introverts are great at. The first one is preparation, because we understand that it's the key to our success. The second thing is, once we get past the horrible, how much we suck at sales and learn it's a system, we then have two really good advantages. We're really great listeners, and we know how to empathize better than most extroverts do. And because of that, we actually have, which is why the book's called The Introvert's Edge, we actually have this huge advantage over our competition. So what you need to be doing as an extrovert is realize that what's easy for you is almost impossible for us. So what you want to do is you want to look at what the 7-step sales process is, and then what you need to do is fit what you say into that. Now, at the school that I had, we actually had a 12-page sales script. Like 12-page, like education sales is a really long script. It was 12 pages long. And when I would hand it to an extrovert or an introvert, they'd be like, seriously, 12 pages? And I'm like, listen, you can earn $30,000 a year, or you can learn these 12 pages and earn over $100,000 in commissions every year. What do you want to do? Think about it. It sounds like a lot of work, but have you ever seen Shakespeare? Anyone here seen Shakespeare? Right? I see these people performing Shakespeare off Broadway, and they're not even getting paid, they're just hoping to get recognized. And I mean, that stuff, it's English, right? But to us, it looks like a different language a lot of the times. So if they can learn that, we can totally learn a sales script. We can learn a sales process. And what you'll find is a sales process, a lot of people, especially introverts, worry that it's going to make them less authentic with a client, right? They're all about wanting to be authentic, which is the same as me. My whole brand's built on authenticity. But here's the thing, if I already know everything that I'm going to say and all of my jokes are pre-written and I've got that structure, I can be more genuine and more in the room, because I'm not stuck in my head worried about what to say. I'm actually looking at the client and seeing what's going on with them and listening to them more attentively. So what you really need to do is you need to write your sales script down. And that'll be horribly uncomfortable for you. Sometimes it'll feel like pulling teeth. But once you get it on paper, you can then give it to introverts and extroverts alike, and even the extroverts will actually get better sales because of that. So stop trying in your business to keep it dynamic. Just like any other part of your business, if you don't have a process, if you don't have a system, like if you try to build a house and you don't follow the plan, a lot of times things will go wrong, right? If you don't have a system for quality in a building process, a lot of times you're going to be going back to that house fixing problems for a client long after you do the key handover, and that's horrific. So that's really what you want to focus on, creating a system. Now, guys, we're actually at time, but I'm going to be staying after this anyway. So for those that want to, are you coming back up? Perfect. Okay. So for those that want to ask me questions after this, I'm actually going to be over here. Actually, I'll go and stand over in that back corner there. So if you want to ask me questions, and this gentleman here, feel free to come and ask me afterwards. But it was lovely to meet you all. Cheers. Thank you very much. Thank you.